London, October 1817. The grand ballroom at Westfield House blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off silk gowns in shades of rose, ivory, and azure. Music swelled from the orchestra, while dancers swept across the polished floor in perfect formation, the very picture of elegance and prosperity. In the shadows near the marble columns, Miss Dorothea Winslow adjusted her modest grey silk gown and pressed herself further into obscurity. At 37 years of age, she had perfected the art of becoming invisible, a necessary skill for a woman who had endured 8 failed seasons before retreating into the more acceptable role of perpetual chaperone. Her nieces, the radiant Miss Helena and Miss Beatrice Winslow, held court near the center of the room, their blonde ringlets and azure eyes drawing admirers like moths to flame. "Aunt Thea, my fan." Beatrice's imperious voice cut through the music without the slightest embarrassment. 20 eager gentlemen turned to watch as the forgotten spinster aunt hurried forward with the forgotten accessory, then disappeared back into the shadows as if she had never existed at all. If stories of invisible women finding unexpected love move your heart, subscribe now and join us on this journey. You won't want to miss what happens next. The evening wore on with predictable monotony. Dorothea fetched dropped gloves, held abandoned shawls, and declined the single pity dance offered by her brother-in-law's elderly uncle, a ritual humiliation she had learned to avoid years ago. When Helena complained of the heat with theatrical breathlessness, Dorothea saw her opportunity. "I shall fetch you some lemonade from the refreshment room, dear," she offered, grateful for any excuse to escape the ballroom's suffocating gaiety. "Don't be long," Helena dismissed her with a wave. "Lord Ashton is about to ask me for the supper dance." Dorothea navigated through the crowded corridors, but instead of turning toward the refreshment room, she found herself drawn to the conservatory at the rear of the house. The glass-walled sanctuary stood empty and blessedly cool, filled with the earthy scent of soil and growing things. Ferns unfurled in shadowed corners, while exotic orchids bloomed on carefully arranged tables. She sank onto a wrought iron bench, closing her eyes and breathing deeply. For the first time in hours, the crushing weight of invisibility lifted slightly. "I apologize if I'm intruding." The deep male voice startled her. Dorothea's eyes flew open to discover a tall figure standing near the orchids, his face obscured by shadows. The conservatory's dim lighting revealed only the outline of broad shoulders and the gleam of silver threading through dark hair. "Not at all," she managed, rising hastily. "I was just escaping." The word carried a hint of dry humor. "As was I." Something in his tone, a weariness that matched her own, made Dorothea settle back onto the bench rather than flee. "The ballroom grows tiresome after one's 8th season," she admitted, then caught herself. Ladies were not supposed to acknowledge their failures so boldly, but the stranger merely moved closer, his features still partially hidden. 8 seasons. That shows remarkable persistence. Or remarkable delusion. The words escaped before she could stop them, the sort of honesty she usually kept locked away. But the darkness and the stranger's non-judgmental tone loosened something inside her. To her surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound that seemed rusty from disuse. "May I join you? The dowagers have been stalking me with frightening determination." "By all means." Dorothea gestured to the bench's empty space. "Though I warn you, conversation with a spinster aunt is hardly the most exciting entertainment Westfield House has to offer." "On the contrary," he said, settling beside her at a respectful distance, "it may prove the only genuine conversation I've had in months." And so they talked. The stranger proved remarkably knowledgeable about botany, and soon they were deep in discussion about the merits of various orchid cultivation techniques. From there, the conversation flowed to literature. She had read Waverley 3 times. He confessed to a weakness for poetry he would never admit in daylight. Philosophy, travel, the absurdities of modern society, topics that would bore the beautiful debutantes in the ballroom, but which filled Dorothea with an intellectual hunger she hadn't realized she'd been starving. An hour passed, then another. The moon rose higher, sending silver light through the conservatory glass. It was only when that moonlight finally illuminated her companion's face that Dorothea truly saw him. Strong features marked by grief and time, eyes the color of moss in deep forests, silver liberally threading through his dark hair. He was not handsome in the classical sense of the young men in the ballroom. His features were too severe, his brow too marked by care, but there was an intelligence in his deep-set eyes and a strength in the line of his jaw that held her gaze completely. And familiar. Terribly, horrifyingly familiar. "Lord Thornwick," she breathed, recognition crashing over her like cold water. Garrett Sinclair, Earl of Thornwick, the widower who had scandalized society by retreating to his country estate for a year of mourning. The man whose wife's death had supposedly devastated him, though whispers suggested Lady Constance had been less than faithful. The eligible, if grieving, Earl, whom every matchmaking mama had targeted this season. His expression shifted as he looked at her properly for the first time, the moonlight revealing her plain features and spinster's cap. But instead of the disappointment she expected, something like wonder crossed his face. "I don't even know your name," he said quietly. Panic seized her. This had been a mistake, a foolish, impossible mistake. She rose abruptly, nearly knocking over a potted fern. "I should return. My nieces will wonder where I've gone." "Wait!" But Dorothea was already fleeing, her grey skirts whispering against the flagstones. Behind her she heard him call out, but she didn't stop until she'd reached the safety of the retiring room, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she been thinking? The Earl of Thornwick didn't seek conversation with spinster aunts. He'd been trapped by circumstance, too polite to leave, and she'd been pathetically grateful for the attention. Tomorrow he would remember the evening with embarrassment, if he remembered it at all. She splashed cool water on her flushed cheeks and returned to the ballroom, where Helena was holding court among a circle of admirers. "There you are, Aunt Thea," her niece said with barely concealed irritation. "What took you so long? I've been parched." Dorothea murmured an apology she didn't mean and resumed her post among the shadows, trying to ignore the way her hands still trembled. It was then that she felt it, the weight of someone's gaze. She looked up to find Lord Thornwick standing at the ballroom's entrance, scanning the crowd with unmistakable purpose. His eyes found hers across the crowded room, and for a moment, time seemed to suspend. Then Helena moved, her blonde curls catching the candlelight, and the Earl's attention was pulled inevitably toward youth and beauty. Dorothea watched him approach her nieces, saw Helena's delighted curtsy, and something inside her withered. Of course. The conversation had been pleasant enough to merit a dance with one of the lovely Winslow girls. That was how these things worked. But Lord Thornwick surprised her. He bowed politely to Helena, exchanged brief pleasantries, then turned to Dorothea with unmistakable intention. "Miss Winslow," he said, his voice carrying across the sudden hush that fell over nearby conversations. "I wonder if I might have the honor of the next dance." The ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Helena's mouth fell open in a most unladylike manner. Lady Ashton's fan stilled mid-flutter. Even the orchestra seemed to hesitate. That is..." Dorothea stammered, acutely aware of every eye now fixed upon her with expressions ranging from shock to poorly concealed amusement. "Unless you're otherwise engaged." The Earl extended his hand with perfect courtesy, as if requesting a dance from a forgotten spinster was the most natural thing in the world. Her sister Letitia materialized at her elbow with the speed of a striking serpent. "Lord Thornwick, how delightful," she simpered, maneuvering Helena forward. "My daughter Helena would be honored to—" "I asked Miss Dorothea," the Earl interrupted with polite firmness. His eyes never left Dorothea's face. "The aunt, not the niece." The words fell into shocked silence. Then the whispers began, rippling outward like stones thrown into still water. Dorothea wanted the floor to open and swallow her whole, but the Earl's steady gaze held something that looked almost like pleading, as if he needed her to accept, to validate that their conversation had meant something beyond a chance encounter in a conservatory. She placed her trembling hand in his. "I would be honored, my lord." His fingers closed around hers with unmistakable warmth. "The honor is entirely mine." He led her onto the dance floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz, that scandalous dance still whispered about in some circles. Dorothea had waltzed exactly 3 times in her life, all during her first ill-fated season, and never with a partner who looked at her as the Earl of Thornwick looked at her now. "You fled before I could learn your name," he said as they began to move. His hand at her waist was proper but steady, guiding her through the steps with practiced ease. "Dorothea Winslow," she managed, hyper-aware of the hundreds of eyes watching them. "Though everyone calls me Thea." "Thea." He tested the name as if tasting wine. "It suits you better than the formal version. Tell me, do you still think orchids require more or less water than ferns?" Despite herself, she laughed, a real laugh that drew more startled looks. "Are we truly going to continue a botanical debate in the middle of a ballroom?" "Why not? It's far more interesting than the usual insipid compliments about the weather or the music." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Though I suppose I should mention you dance beautifully." "I dance adequately," she corrected, "and only because I've watched others do it for 16 years. 16 years? His brow furrowed. "But you said 8 seasons. "I gave up 9 years ago," she admitted. "Became a chaperone instead. It's more acceptable than being an aging wallflower." Something shifted in his expression, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirit. "And do you prefer being invisible?" The question cut too close to truth. Dorothea missed a step, but he steadied her smoothly. Around them the waltz continued, couples swirling past in a blur of color and judgment. "I've learned to prefer what's expected of me," she said carefully. "That's not an answer. It's the only answer a woman in my position can afford to give." The music swelled toward its conclusion. As the final notes faded, Lord Thornwick bowed over her hand with deliberate formality. "Thank you for the dance, Miss Winslow. It was the most honest conversation I've had since returning to London." Before she could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the crowd. Dorothea stood alone in the middle of the dance floor, aware of the whispers building around her like a gathering storm. "Did you see? The Earl and the Spinster aren't. How mortifying for those poor nieces. I heard she trapped him in the conservatory." Dorothea lifted her chin and walked back to her shadowed corner with as much dignity as she could muster. Helena and Beatrice were waiting, their pretty faces twisted with humiliation and fury. "How could you?" Helena hissed. "Do you know how that looked? Everyone is laughing at us." "Lord Ashton won't even look at me now," Beatrice added, tears threatening to spill from her blue eyes. "He probably thinks we're all desperate spinsters. That's quite enough, girls." Letitia's voice cut through their complaints like a whip. She turned to Dorothea with cold fury in her eyes. "We're leaving, immediately." The carriage ride home was conducted in icy silence. Only when they reached the Winslow townhouse did Letitia unleash her rage. "I don't know what game you think you're playing, Dorothea," she said as soon as the door closed behind them. "But it ends now. The Earl of Thornwick is far above your station, and you've made us all look ridiculous. I didn't ask him to—" "I don't care what you asked or didn't ask. You're here to make Helena and Beatrice look good, not to draw attention to yourself. Tomorrow you will send Lord Thornwick a polite note declining any further attentions. Is that understood?" Dorothea looked at her sister, at the woman who had given her a home after their parents died, but who treated her more like a servant than family. At the beautiful nieces who saw her as nothing more than a convenient accessory. At the life she'd built from the scraps of other people's happiness. "Yes, Letitia," she said quietly. "I understand perfectly." That night, alone in her small room at the top of the house, Dorothea did not write the note her sister demanded. Instead, she took out her own small writing desk and penned a brief note thanking Lord Thornwick for the dance and the pleasant conversation. She sealed it carefully, then placed it in her drawer. She would not send it. That would be open defiance, and she was not quite brave enough for that. But the act of writing her own truth, rather than her sister's lie, settled something vital within her. She sat by the window and watched the moon set over London's rooftops, wondering what madness had possessed the Earl of Thornwick to single her out from all the beautiful young women in that ballroom, and wondering, despite knowing better, if he might possibly do it again. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Dorothea was in the morning room attempting to read, while Helena and Beatrice practiced their watercolors with minimal enthusiasm, when the butler announced, "The Earl of Thornwick." 3 female heads snapped up in unison. Letitia, who had been reviewing the household accounts, nearly knocked over her inkwell. Helena dropped her paintbrush, sending a splash of crimson across her canvas. Beatrice let out a small squeak. And Dorothea. Dorothea felt her heart perform an alarming acrobatic feat somewhere in the vicinity of her throat. Lord Thornwick entered the morning room with the same commanding presence he'd displayed in the ballroom, though his expression was more reserved in daylight. He carried a bouquet of orchids, rare varieties that Dorothea recognized from their conversation. "Lady Winslow," he greeted Letitia with a bow, "thank you for receiving me on such short notice." Letitia had recovered her composure with impressive speed. She gestured toward Helena and Beatrice, who had arranged themselves in artfully pretty poses. "Lord Thornwick, what a delightful surprise. My daughters were just mentioning how much they enjoyed seeing you last evening." "How kind." His tone suggested polite disinterest. "However, I've come to call upon Miss Dorothea Winslow, if she's at liberty to receive visitors." The silence that followed could have shattered crystal. Helena's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Beatrice's eyes went round as saucers. Letitia's face cycled through shock, confusion, and barely suppressed rage. That is... Surely you mean... Letitia gestured helplessly at her daughters. "I mean Miss Dorothea," Lord Thornwick said with perfect clarity. He turned to Dorothea, who remained frozen in her chair, and offered her the orchids. "I hoped we might continue our discussion from last evening. These specimens are from my conservatory at Thornwick Hall. I thought you might appreciate them." Dorothea rose on trembling legs and accepted the flowers, their exotic blooms almost too beautiful to touch. "They're magnificent, my lord, as is the company that inspired me to bring them." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Might we take a turn about the garden? With your sister's permission, of course." Letitia looked as if she'd swallowed something extremely unpleasant. "The garden, yes, of course. Dorothea, do try not to, that is, take your shawl. The morning is quite cool." "Helena and I could accompany you," Beatrice offered desperately, "to act as chaperones." The irony of that statement, of the beautiful nieces offering to chaperone their spinster aunt, was not lost on anyone. Lord Thornwick's eyebrow quirked slightly. "I'm certain Miss Dorothea is perfectly capable of observing propriety," he said, "though if you prefer, Lady Winslow might watch from the window." And so Dorothea found herself walking through the modest garden behind the townhouse, acutely aware of 3 female faces pressed against the morning room window. The October air carried the scent of dying roses and impending winter. "I'm sorry if my visit has caused difficulties," Lord Thornwick said, once they were out of immediate earshot. "Though from the expression on your sister's face, I suspect difficulties may have already existed." "You could say that." Dorothea clutched the orchids like a shield. "Lord Thornwick, I must ask, why are you here? Surely you realize how this looks. People will talk. They already are talking." "Let them." He paused beside a withered rosebush, studying it as if it held secrets. "Do you know why I married Lady Constance?" The question caught her off guard. "That's hardly my concern, my lord." "No, but I'm going to tell you anyway because I think you'll understand." He turned to face her, his expression grave. "I married her because she was beautiful and accomplished and exactly what an Earl was supposed to choose. And I spent 15 years in a marriage that was a daily exercise in mutual contempt." Dorothea said nothing, shocked by his candor. "Constance despised me for being tediously honorable," he continued. I came to despise her for reasons I won't burden you with. When she died last year, society expected me to be devastated. The truth is, I felt nothing but relief and guilt at that relief." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because last night, I sat in a dark conservatory and talked to a woman who spoke honestly, who didn't simper or flatter or scheme, who has a mind actually worth engaging." He stepped closer, his voice dropping, and something raw entered his expression. "My late wife, Lady Constance, was the pinnacle of society's expectations. She was beautiful, accomplished, and utterly devoid of kindness or character. I spent 15 years trapped in a beautiful, cold hell, fulfilling my duty. I cannot endure another season pretending that beauty is a substitute for substance." Do you know how rare substance is, Miss Winslow? How desperately rare. I'm 37 years old, Dorothea said flatly, needing him to understand. I'm a spinster, a failed spinster who serves as an unpaid companion to her nieces. I have no dowry, no prospects, no beauty to recommend me. Whatever you think you found last night was an illusion. Was it? He reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and tucked a loose curl behind her ear. The gesture was so gentle, so intimate that it made her eyes sting. Because I think I found the only genuine woman in a room full of pretty masks, and I'd very much like to know her better. People will say terrible things about you. People have been saying terrible things about me for years. His smile was crooked, self-deprecating. They said I was cold, unfeeling, that I drove my wife to infidelity through neglect. Adding pursues spinsters to the list seems rather mild by comparison. Despite everything, Dorothea laughed, a watery sound that threatened to become something else entirely. This is madness. Perhaps, he offered his arm. But if we're going to cause a scandal anyway, we might as well enjoy ourselves. Will you drive with me tomorrow, in Hyde Park, during the fashionable hour where all of London can see? It was a challenge and an invitation both. A chance to step out of the shadows and into something terrifying and wonderful and utterly impossible. Yes, Dorothea heard herself say. I will. His answering smile transformed his entire face, erasing years of grief and cynicism. Then I shall call for you at 4 o'clock. And Miss Winslow? Wear something other than grey. You've been in shadow long enough. He bowed and departed, leaving Dorothea standing in the dying garden with a handful of orchids and a heart that had forgotten how to hope. She turned to find Letitia, Helena, and Beatrice staring at her from the window with identical expressions of horror. The storm that followed was predictable. Letitia railed about propriety and family reputation and knowing one's place. Helena wept dramatically about her ruined prospects. Beatrice alternated between sullen silence and bitter accusations. Through it all, Dorothea remained quiet, the orchids cradled in her lap, and counted the hours until tomorrow at 4 o'clock. The next day dawned grey and cold, but Dorothea barely noticed. She'd lain awake most of the night, alternating between exhilaration and terror, wondering if Lord Thornwick would actually appear, or if the entire encounter had been some elaborate joke she was too naive to understand. At 3:30, Letitia made one final attempt at intervention. You're making a fool of yourself, Dorothea. The Earl is amusing himself at your expense. Can't you see that? Perhaps he is, Dorothea admitted, fastening the Spencer jacket over her deep blue walking dress, the only gown she owned that wasn't grey or brown. But I would rather be a fool who tried than a coward who never did. At precisely 4 o'clock, the Earl of Thornwick's elegant barouche pulled up before the townhouse. He descended and offered his hand with the same deliberate courtesy he'd shown the previous evening, heedless of the curtains twitching in every window along the street. Miss Winslow, he said, his eyes warming as they took in her blue dress. You look lovely. I look different, she corrected as he handed her into the carriage. Lovely is a strong word. Then allow me to rephrase. You look like yourself, rather than someone trying to disappear. And that is lovely indeed. The drive to Hyde Park was conducted in comfortable conversation, more botany, some discussion of current events, and a surprising amount of laughter. Dorothea had forgotten what it felt like to speak freely, without carefully editing every word. Then they reached Rotten Row, and the full weight of their visibility crashed down. Hyde Park, during the fashionable hour, was London society's stage, where everyone came to see and be seen. And see they did. As Lord Thornwick's carriage rolled slowly along the row, every head turned. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Fans snapped open to hide shocked whispers. Gentlemen's horses shied at the sudden tension in their riders' grips. They're all staring, Dorothea whispered, fighting the urge to shrink down in her seat. Let them. Lord Thornwick's hand found hers beneath the laprobe, squeezing gently. Though if you're uncomfortable, we can leave. Before Dorothea could answer, a gleaming black phaeton pulled alongside them. The woman driving it was one of London's most celebrated beauties, Lady Vivian Hartwell, widow of a wealthy baron and known for her cutting wit and ambitious matchmaking schemes. "Why, Lord Thornwick?" she purred, her amber eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "What an unexpected sight. I had no idea you were interested in charitable works." The insult landed like a physical blow. Dorothea felt her cheeks burn, but Lord Thornwick's expression didn't change. "Lady Vivian, still frightening horses with that aggressive driving, I see." "One must make an impression somehow," Vivian replied, her gaze flickering dismissively over Dorothea. "Though I confess I'm puzzled by yours. Are we to understand this is a serious courtship or merely a peculiar form of entertainment?" "You may understand whatever you wish," Lord Thornwick said coolly. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we were enjoying a private conversation." He urged the horses forward, leaving Vivian sputtering behind them. Dorothea's hands shook in her lap. "That was," she began, "vicious, cruel, typical of the Tun's worst instincts." He glanced at her with concern. "Are you all right?" "I've endured worse," she said, trying for levity and failing, "though usually not so publicly." "Then allow me to make something equally public." He pulled the carriage to a stop beneath a large oak tree where half the fashionable world could witness what happened next. "Miss Winslow, Thea, I am calling on you because I find you intelligent, genuine, and entirely captivating. Not out of pity, not for entertainment, but because in 2 evenings you've given me more honest conversation than I've had in 15 years of marriage." He raised her hand to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't care what they whisper. Do you?" It was a question and a challenge, both. A chance to retreat to the shadows where life was safe and small and empty, or to step forward into the light with all its risks and possibilities. "I care," Dorothea admitted, "but not enough to run." His smile was worth every whisper, every shocked stare, every bit of vicious gossip that would fill tomorrow's drawing rooms. "Then shall we continue our circuit?" They drove on, and gradually Dorothea found herself relaxing. Other carriages passed with varying degrees of curiosity and judgment, but Lord Thornwick maintained a steady stream of conversation that distracted her from the worst of it. He told stories about his estate in Derbyshire, about the ancient oak forests and the river where he'd fished as a boy. She found herself describing her childhood before her parents died, when she'd been happy and hopeful and believed the world held endless possibilities. "What happened?" he asked gently. "Between that girl and the woman hiding in conservatories?" Dorothea was quiet for a long moment. 8 seasons of rejection, she finally said, of watching other girls, prettier, richer, more accomplished, find husbands while I collected polite refusals and pitying looks. My parents died when I was 25, and Letitia took me in. She said I could earn my keep by helping with Helena and Beatrice, and somewhere along the way, I became invisible. Not to me. The words, simple and sincere, made something inside her chest crack open. "Why?" she whispered. "Why me when you could have anyone?" "Because anyone usually wants the title and the estate and the social position," he said. "You wanted to talk about orchids. You laughed at my terrible poetry jokes. You didn't simper or flatter or scheme. You were just yourself." He paused. "Do you know how rare that is?" "I know how unlikely this is." "Unlikely isn't impossible." He turned the carriage back toward Mayfair as afternoon faded toward evening. "I'd like to call on you again tomorrow, and the day after, and for as many days as you'll allow, unless I'm being too presumptuous." "You're being terrifying," Dorothea admitted, "but in the best possible way." When they returned to the Winslow townhouse, Helena and Beatrice were waiting at the window, their pretty faces twisted with an emotion Dorothea had never inspired in them before. Jealousy. Over the following weeks, Lord Thornwick became a fixture at the townhouse, arriving each day with unfailing punctuality and departing only when Letitia's increasingly icy demeanor made remaining impossible. He brought books he thought Dorothea would enjoy, sought her opinion on improvements to his estate, and generally treated her as if her thoughts mattered. The Tun's reaction evolved from shocked amusement to grudging interest. Some found the courtship romantic, a widower and a spinster finding unexpected love. Others remained convinced it was an elaborate joke or, worse, evidence of Lord Thornwick's supposed instability after his wife's death. Lady Vivienne led the latter camp. At a musicale 3 weeks into the courtship, she cornered Dorothea near the punch bowl. "How clever you've been," she said, her voice honey-sweet and venomous, capturing a grief-addled Earl through sympathy. "Tell me, how long do you think it will last once his wits return?" "I wouldn't know," Dorothea replied, fighting to keep her voice steady, "as I haven't been attempting to capture anyone." "Oh, please," Vivian's laugh was brittle. "We all know what you are, a desperate spinster clinging to her last chance. Lord Thornwick deserves better than a charity case." The words echoed Dorothea's deepest fears. Before she could formulate a response, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "I agree completely," Lord Thornwick said, appearing at Dorothea's side with a glass of lemonade. "I deserve someone honest, intelligent, and kind, which is precisely what I've found in Miss Winslow." He turned to Vivienne with ice in his eyes. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we're expected elsewhere." He guided Dorothea away, but the damage was done. Her hands trembled around her punch cup, and she could feel the weight of speculative gazes from every corner of the room. "I should go home," she whispered. "This was a mistake." "No." His hand tightened on her elbow. "What would be a mistake is letting her poison what we're building. Thea, look at me." She reluctantly met his gaze. "I am 42 years old," he said firmly. "I spent 15 years in a miserable marriage. I am not grief-addled, desperate, or amusing myself at your expense. I am courting you because you make me laugh. Because talking to you feels like coming home. Because for the first time in decades, I can imagine a future that doesn't feel like a prison sentence. But what if they're right? What if you wake up one day and realize that I fell in love with the most remarkable woman in London?" He smiled. "I rather hope that day comes soon." The words hung between them, shocking in their directness. Love. He'd said love, there in the middle of Lady Hartwell's musicale, with half of society pretending not to eavesdrop. "Garrett," she breathed, using his given name for the first time. "I know it's too soon," he said quietly, "and if you need more time, I'll wait. But I wanted you to know that this—" He gestured between them. "This is real for me. Terrifyingly, wonderfully real." Before Dorothea could respond, the pianist struck up a waltz. Lord Thornwick held out his hand. "Dance with me?" She placed her hand in his and let him lead her onto the floor. As they began to move, she was distantly aware of the shocked whispers starting up again, but for once she didn't care. All that mattered was the solid warmth of his hand at her waist, the steadiness of his gaze, and the impossible, miraculous truth that someone saw her, really saw her, and chose her anyway. The waltz ended too soon. As the music faded, Lord Thornwick leaned close enough that only she could hear. "I'm going to call on your brother-in-law tomorrow, to formally request permission to court you. Is that acceptable?" He paused, his grey eyes searching hers with uncommon intensity. "I know it is unconventionally swift, Thea, but at 42, I have wasted enough of my life on convention. I see no reason to delay when I am this certain of my heart." Her heart, which she had thought settled and resigned, gave a painful, joyous leap against her ribs. "Yes," she managed. "That's acceptable." "Good." He pressed a kiss to her gloved knuckles, a gesture that sent fresh waves of whispers through the room. "Because I intend to marry you, Dorothea Winslow, if you'll have me." The proposal, informal as it was, should have terrified her. Instead, it filled her with a giddy joy she hadn't felt since childhood. "I might," she said, allowing herself a small smile, "if you ask properly. Then I shall endeavor to make it memorable." The following day, Garrett called at the townhouse and was received by both Mr. Reginald Winslow, Letitia's hapless husband, and Letitia herself. The meeting lasted an hour, during which Dorothea paced her small room and tried not to imagine all the ways her sister might sabotage this fragile happiness. When the butler finally summoned her downstairs, she found Garrett waiting in the drawing room with Letitia and Reginald. Her sister's expression was thunderous. "Lord Thornwick has made a most unusual request," Letitia said, each word dripping with distaste. "He wishes to court you with the intention of marriage." "And I've given my permission," Reginald added, looking bewildered but determined. As the head of this household, it's my decision. Reginald, the girls, her husband interrupted with uncharacteristic firmness, are not currently being courted by an earl. Dorothea is. I see no reason to refuse. The reason, you fool, Letitia finally snapped, her voice trembling with a rage that went beyond simple jealousy, is that love is a fantasy. Marriage is a transaction, one that secures the future of this family. And she, Letitia pointed a shaking finger at Dorothea, is jeopardizing her niece's futures for a feeling that dies before the wedding flowers do. The outburst left a ringing silence in its wake. Reginald stared at his wife with something approaching pity. Dorothea felt the blood drain from her face at the bitterness in her sister's voice, a bitterness born, she suddenly understood, from Letitia's own loveless, dutiful marriage. Garrett caught Dorothea's eye and smiled, a private, triumphant smile that made her want to laugh and cry simultaneously. Then it's settled, he said, rising. Miss Winslow, might I take you for a drive? To celebrate? Dorothea looked at her sister's furious face, her brother-in-law's apologetic one, and Garrett's hopeful expression. Yes, I'd like that very much. They escaped into the cool afternoon air. Instead of heading toward Hyde Park, Garrett directed the driver toward the less fashionable but more peaceful Green Park. Thank you, Dorothea said once they were alone, for doing this properly, for not just assuming. I would never assume. He took her hand, carefully removing her glove so he could lace his fingers through hers, a shocking intimacy that made her breath catch. Thea, I need you to understand something. This isn't a whim or a rescue or anything other than what it appears to be. A man who's fallen in love with an extraordinary woman and wants to spend the rest of his life proving himself worthy of her. I'm not extraordinary. You survived 8 seasons of rejection and emerged with your kindness intact. You gave up your dreams to care for your nieces, who treat you abominably. You hide your light because the world taught you that being seen was dangerous. His thumb traced circles on her palm. That's not just extraordinary, it's heroic. I don't feel heroic, I feel terrified. Good, he said with surprising fierceness, because I'm terrified too, of disappointing you, of repeating past mistakes, of proving all the gossips right. He raised her hand to his lips. But I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. They sat in silence for a moment, the autumn sun filtering through bare branches above them. Around them the park was nearly empty, no fashionable crowds to witness or judge. Ask me, Dorothea said suddenly. Ask me properly. Garrett's eyes widened. Then, to her shock and delight, he climbed out of the carriage and knelt on the grass beside it, heedless of his expensive breeches. Dorothea Winslow, he said, his voice carrying clearly in the quiet park. I am 42 years old, set in my ways, and carry more burdens than Wellington's army on the march. But I love you. Your honesty, your intelligence, your terrible jokes about ferns. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to argue about orchid cultivation and debate philosophy and laugh at things no one else understands. Will you marry me? It wasn't the most poetic proposal. It wasn't delivered at a ball or garden party where all of society could witness, but it was real and honest and perfectly them. Yes, Dorothea said, tears streaming down her face. Yes, Garrett, I'll marry you. He surged up and pulled her into an embrace that was entirely improper and utterly perfect. When he finally released her, they were both laughing through tears. I don't have a ring yet, he admitted. I was planning to wait until... I don't need a ring right now, she interrupted. I just need you. They returned to the townhouse in a glow of happiness that even Letitia's disapproval couldn't dim. Helena and Beatrice, however, provided the next challenge. You cannot be serious, Helena said when the engagement was announced that evening. Aunt Thea is getting married before us? That's not fair, Beatrice wailed. Everyone will think we're less desirable than a spinster. Enough, Garrett said, his voice cutting through their complaints with unexpected authority. Your aunt has been nothing but kind to you both, and this is how you repay her? With jealousy and selfishness? Both girls fell silent, shocked at being reprimanded by an earl. If you cannot be happy for her, he continued more gently, then at least have the grace to remain silent, because she deserves better than your petty cruelty. To Dorothea's amazement, Helena burst into tears, real tears, not the practiced kind she deployed for male attention. "I'm sorry, Aunt Thea," she choked out, the tears suddenly genuine. "We've been horrid, but don't you see?" She looked up, her expression a mixture of shame and terror. "We've spent our entire lives being terrified of becoming you. We were taught that your life was a failure, and now you've won. It makes us the failures." Beatrice sniffled, her own tears flowing now. "We didn't think anyone would want you, and now someone does, and he's an Earl, and we're just jealous," Dorothea finished quietly. "I understand. Truly I do." "How can you?" Helena demanded. "You've won." "I haven't won anything." Dorothea looked at her nieces, really looked at them for the first time in years, saw past the pretty faces to the insecurity beneath. "I've just been lucky enough to find someone who sees past what society deems valuable, and someday, if you're fortunate, you'll find the same." "Not likely," Beatrice muttered. "Not after everyone sees the Earl marry the Spinster aunt. We'll be laughingstocks." "Or," Garrett interjected, "you'll be the lovely nieces of a countess." Society has remarkably short memory when it comes to scandal that ends in a titled marriage. The wedding was scheduled for 6 weeks hence, a delay that felt simultaneously too long and terrifyingly short. Dorothea had assumed it would be a small affair, a quiet ceremony in the Winslow family's parish church with minimal fanfare. She should have known better. The Tun, having decided that the Earl of Thornwick's courtship of the Spinster aunt was either romantically tragic or tragically romantic, embraced the wedding with enthusiasm bordering on mania. Invitations were coveted. Betting books at White's took odds on whether the bride would faint at the altar. Lady Vivian Hartwell, not content to let the matter rest, launched a whisper campaign suggesting that Lord Thornwick had only proposed because he'd incurred gambling debts and needed Dorothea's non-existent fortune. The rumor was absurd. Everyone knew the Winslow family had no money, and Garrett's estate was prosperous beyond measure. But truth had never been an obstacle to good gossip. The situation reached a crisis point 2 weeks before the wedding at Lady Ashton's card party. Dorothea had been avoiding such events, but Garrett insisted they attend together. "If we hide," he argued, "we give the gossips power. Better to face them head on." He was right, but that didn't make walking into Lady Ashton's drawing room any less terrifying. The conversations stuttered and stopped as they entered. Fans snapped open. Eyes followed their every movement. They made it through the first hour with minimal incident. Then Lady Vivian made her move. "Lord Thornwick," she called out in a voice designed to carry, "I must congratulate you on your impending nuptials, though I confess I'm curious about one thing." Garrett's expression remained neutral, but Dorothea felt him tense. "And what might that be, Lady Vivian?" "Well, one hears such conflicting reports about your finances." She smiled, all false concern. "Some suggest that your late wife's extravagances left the estate rather encumbered. It must be a relief to secure a bride with means, even if those means are modest." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to watch the drama unfold. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Garrett said coldly. "My finances are in excellent order and have been for years. Perhaps you're confusing me with someone else." "Oh, I'm quite certain of my information." Vivienne produced a folded paper from her reticule. "I have a letter here from a banker in Derby, detailing certain debts incurred through gambling and poor investments. Rather substantial debts, I'm afraid." She held the letter aloft like a trophy. Murmurs rippled through the room. Dorothea felt the blood drain from her face, but Garrett merely raised an eyebrow. "Might I see that letter?" Vivian handed it over with barely concealed triumph. Garrett examined it for a long moment, then began to laugh, a genuine sound of amusement that confused everyone present. "This is quite creative," he said, still chuckling. "The seal is an excellent forgery. Almost convinced me for a moment. But unfortunately for your scheme, Lady Vivian, I don't have accounts with any bank in Derby. All my banking is done through Coutts in London, as it has been for 20 years. He turned to address the room at large. Furthermore, I've never gambled a day in my life. Found it terribly boring, actually. And my estate brings in approximately £12,000 per annum, which makes poor investments rather difficult to achieve. So unless someone can explain how I've simultaneously incurred massive debts while maintaining excellent credit and a flourishing estate, I'm forced to conclude that this letter is a complete fabrication. He fixed Vivian with a look that could have frozen fire. The question is, who would be desperate enough to forge banking documents in an attempt to sabotage my wedding? Lady Vivian had gone white. Around them, the murmurs intensified, but now they were directed at her, not at Garrett. Someone sent it to me, she stammered. I was only trying to warn... You were trying to humiliate my fiancé, Garrett interrupted, his voice like ice. Because you cannot bear to see someone you've deemed inferior achieve happiness. He paused, his gaze sweeping the assembled company before returning to Vivian with devastating calm. Permit me to be perfectly clear. Miss Winslow possesses an integrity and intelligence that, I fear, you could never hope to comprehend. And nothing, not forged documents, not desperate schemes, not wounded vanity, will prevent my marriage to her. He offered his arm to Dorothea, who took it with shaking hands. Come, my dear. The air in here has become rather toxic. They departed to stunned silence. Only when they reached the safety of Garrett's carriage did Dorothea allow herself to collapse against the seat. That was, she began. Necessary, he finished grimly. Vivian has been spreading poison for weeks. Better to excise it publicly than let it fester. She forged banking documents, Garrett. That's not just gossip. That's illegal, yes. Actionable, probably. But pursuing legal remedies would only prolong the scandal. He took her hands. Are you all right? I'm angry, Dorothea admitted. Furious, actually. How dare she try to destroy your reputation just to hurt me? Because she's bitter and cruel and cannot stand to see others happy. He cupped her face gently. But it's over now. By tomorrow morning, all of London will know she attempted to pass off forged documents. Her reputation will never recover. He was right. By the next afternoon, Lady Vivian had retreated to her country estate in disgrace. The betting books at White's shifted dramatically in favor of the wedding proceeding without incident, and public opinion, fickle as always, swung firmly behind the romance of the widowed Earl and the spinster aunt. The wedding day dawned clear and cold. Dorothea stood in her borrowed wedding gown, one of Letitia's hastily altered, and stared at her reflection in disbelief. In a few hours, she would be the Countess of Thornwick. She, who had accepted spinsterhood as her permanent condition. She who had learned to make herself invisible. You look beautiful, Helena said softly from the doorway. She'd been subdued since the card party incident, genuinely trying to make amends. Really, Aunt Thea, beautiful. I look the same as I always have, Dorothea replied, only in a nicer dress. No. Beatrice joined her sister, her own eyes suspiciously damp. You look happy. We've never seen you look happy before. The words were a gift and an indictment both. Had she really been so thoroughly miserable for so many years that even her nieces had noticed? I was happy once, Dorothea said quietly, when I was very young, before I learned to be afraid. I suppose I'm simply remembering how. The ceremony was held at St. George's, Hanover Square, the most fashionable church in London. The pews were packed with curious spectators, most of whom had come to witness what they still considered an unlikely match. But when Dorothea walked down the aisle on Reginald's arm and saw Garrett waiting at the altar, his face illuminated with joy, none of it mattered. Not the whispers, not the stares, not the years of loneliness that had led to this moment. Dearly beloved, the rector began, and Dorothea felt her future unfold before her like a flower opening to the sun. The vows were traditional. The ring, a simple gold band with a single diamond, fit perfectly. And when Garrett kissed her at the ceremony's conclusion, it was chaste and proper, and absolutely perfect. The wedding breakfast at Thornwick House was a smaller affair, limited to close friends and family. Helena and Beatrice actually behaved themselves, aided by the presence of two handsome young officers who had served under Garrett during the war. Even Letitia managed to look vaguely pleased, perhaps recognizing that having a countess in the family elevated her own social status. As the afternoon faded toward evening and guests began to depart, Garrett found Dorothea standing alone in the conservatory attached to Thornwick House, a glass-walled paradise even more elaborate than the one at Westfield House where they'd first met. "Hiding from your own wedding breakfast," he teased. "Catching my breath," she corrected. "It's been rather an extraordinary day." "Indeed it has." He moved to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Any regrets?" "None," she said honestly, "though I keep expecting to wake up and discover this has all been a dream. If it's a dream, we're sharing it." He finally gave in to temptation and pulled her into his arms. "My countess. My brilliant, beautiful countess. I'm not beautiful. You are to me." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, finally her lips, with a thoroughness that would have been scandalous if they weren't married. "Every day, Thea. I will remind you every single day until you believe it." They stood together as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had been alone for so long that togetherness still felt miraculous. 3 months later, in the conservatory at Thornwick Hall in Derbyshire, Dorothea pruned her orchids while Garrett read aloud from a manuscript she'd been working on, a collection of essays about life as a spinster in Regency society. "This bit here is particularly biting," he commented, marking a passage. "You've captured Lady Vivian perfectly without naming her." "One must be subtle about one's revenge," Dorothea said primly, though her smile belied the innocent tone. "Nothing subtle about this." He waved the manuscript. "You're going to cause quite a stir when this publishes." "That's rather the point." She set down her pruning shears and moved to sit beside him. "Too many women are suffering in silence, convinced their worth diminishes with each passing season. Someone needs to say it's a lie. My revolutionary countess," he kissed her temple, "have I mentioned today that I adore you? Not in the last hour, so I was beginning to worry." Their marriage had settled into a comfortable rhythm, winters in London, summers at Thornwick Hall, and a mutual agreement that society's opinions mattered far less than their own happiness. Helena had made a respectable match with one of Garrett's officer friends, and Beatrice was being courted by a wealthy merchant's son with genuine affection on both sides. Even Letitia had thawed slightly, though she still occasionally made pointed comments about unusual arrangements. But the greatest surprise came that evening when the doctor confirmed what Dorothea had barely dared to hope. "You're quite certain?" she asked, her hands trembling. "Quite certain, my lady. Approximately 3 months along, I should estimate. Though given your age, we must take extra care." He continued with cautions and instructions, but Dorothea barely heard them. 38 years old and expecting her first child. It should have been impossible. Yet here she was, proof that life could surprise even those who had given up on surprises. She found Garrett in the library, reviewing estate accounts. He looked up as she entered, and something in her expression made him set down his pen immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She crossed to him, taking his hands in hers. "Absolutely nothing is wrong. In fact, something is remarkably, impossibly right." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Thea, we're going to have a child," she said, half laughing, half crying. "I'm pregnant, Garrett. I'm 38 years old and pregnant, and the doctor says everything appears perfectly healthy, and I can't quite believe it's real." He pulled her into his lap, holding her as if she were made of glass. "A child," he repeated wonderingly. "Our child. Are you happy?" "Happy?" He laughed, the sound joyous and free. "Thea, I'm terrified and elated and grateful beyond words. A child with you, nothing could make me happier." That night, as they lay together in the darkness, Garrett's hand resting protectively over the slight swell of her belly, Dorothea thought about the woman she'd been a year ago, the invisible spinster aunt, convinced her life was over before it had truly begun. "What are you thinking about?" Garrett murmured. "How different everything is," she admitted. "How different I am." "Not so different." He pulled her closer. "Just finally visible, finally seen. Because of you." Because of us both. He kissed her hair. You were always extraordinary, Thea. I just had the good sense to notice. Their son was born the following autumn, a healthy, red-faced infant with his father's eyes and his mother's determination. They named him Thomas, and he was loved beyond measure. Dorothea's essays were published anonymously under the title Observations of a Spinster, and became an unexpected success, with women across England writing letters of gratitude and recognition. Some figured out that the author was the Countess of Thornwick, but by then no one cared about the scandal. They were too busy buying copies. On their third wedding anniversary, Garrett and Dorothea returned to Westfield House for a ball, their first since the night they'd met in the conservatory. The assembled crowd parted as they entered, but this time the whispers were admiring rather than mocking. "Look how happy they are," someone murmured. "3 years and still besotted," another observer noted. "Who would have predicted it?" Dorothea caught Garrett's eye and smiled. Who indeed? When the orchestra struck up a waltz, he led her onto the floor, as he had that first night, though now his hand curved possessively around her waist, and there was no question about the depth of his feelings. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked, as they moved through the steps. "Choosing me over all those beautiful young debutantes?" Garrett looked at her, really looked at her, the way he had since that first conversation in the dark conservatory. "My dearest Thea," he said, his voice warm with conviction, "I didn't choose you over anyone. I simply recognized what everyone else was too blind to see, that true worth has nothing to do with age or conventional beauty, but with the courage to remain kind in a cruel world, to stay honest when lying would be easier, and to keep hoping when hope seems impossible." He spun her gently, and the candlelight caught the diamond on her finger, a ring that represented so much more than a marriage contract. It represented choosing to be seen, choosing to hope, choosing to believe that sometimes, miraculously, life offered second chances to those brave enough to take them. As the music swelled toward its conclusion, Dorothea looked around the ballroom, at Helena dancing with her husband, at Beatrice laughing with her beau, at Letitia actually smiling for once, at the life she'd built from the ruins of her abandoned dreams. "No regrets?" Garrett whispered. "Not a single one," she replied, and she meant it with her whole heart. Dear listener, perhaps you too have felt invisible. Perhaps you've watched others receive the opportunities, the love, the recognition that you've been denied. Perhaps you've been told, through words or silence, that your time has passed, that your worth diminishes with each birthday, that certain dreams are no longer meant for you. But Dorothea's story reminds us that visibility isn't something granted by others. It's something we claim for ourselves. That courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to step forward despite it. That the right people will see our worth not in spite of our age or circumstances, but because of the strength and character those years have built. Your story isn't over. The best chapters might still be unwritten, and somewhere there is someone who will recognize your value, not as a compromise or a consolation, but as the rare and precious gift it truly is. You simply need the courage to remain visible long enough for them to find you. Tonight, know that you are worthy of every happiness at every age. Rest in that truth. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue creating stories of love, resilience, and unexpected hope for those who need them most.